Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the North Sydney Local Planning Panel. I would first like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, of elders past and present, on which this meeting takes place. I would also like to pay respect to past civic and community representatives who have deliberated and made decisions in this place. My name is Grant Christmas. I'm the chair of today's panel meeting. The panel today also comprises Jan Morell, who's an expert member, Ian Pickles, who is an expert member, and Veronique Marchendur, who's the community representative. Today we've got 4 development applications and 2 planning proposals. The first of those development applications will be that we will consider as number 6 Shellbank Parade for Morn. Second DA is 55A Carter Street, Camaray. Third DA 182, 186 Blues Point Road, Plants Point. And the fourth DA is 2/146 Karuba Road, Karuba Point. And then we'll proceed to the 2 planning proposals. First of those being 50 to 56 Aitchison Street, St Leonards, and secondly 41 McLaren Street, North Sydney. Now, before we get the meeting underway, I've been provided with each of the panel members has filled in a conflict of interest form in respect to those declarations. Myself, Mr. Pickles, and Ms. Marchendur have declared no conflicts of interest. However, Mrs. Morell has, in respect to item number 1, 6 Shellbank Parade for Morn, declared that she may, she chaired previous panel meetings that considered similar applications, and therefore she may reasonably be perceived to have a conflict of interest. And on that basis, Mrs. Morell will not consider this matter, and we will proceed to hear that matter, and Mrs. Morell will leave the room and will have no further discussion or any part in the consideration of that item. Can that please be noted? Thank you, Mrs. Morell. Now, in respect to item number 1, I might just run through the list of speakers I have to make sure it accords with those people that I have up on the screen. Now, the usual process is that objectors or submitters to the application will address us first, and any applicants' representatives will address us second. I have Brian Holt, who wishes to, I've got a raised hand. Thank you, Mr. Holt. I've got James Spenceley. Yes, you got another hand. Thank you, Mr. Spenceley. So they're the 2 people I have listed as being submitters stroke objectors to the application. Then in respect to the applicant's representatives, I have Philippa Hayes, the planner. Not on. Not on?
Who's Guy?
It's Guy Perossian here. Could I just jump in? I've got a text message from Philippa, and she may be coming up her ID of her computer as Gaha, so she may not be being entered on that basis. It's not her normal computer that she's using, it's her husband's computer.
Thank you, Mr.
So, thank you.
Note that.
She's in now.
Ms. Hayes, are you there?
Hang on.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry, Ms. Hayes, are you there? We couldn't hear you at first.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
It can indeed. Thank you very much. Mr. Parisian's there. We heard from him. Greg Patch. Yes, I can see Mr. Patch up on the screen. And we've got Doris Lee, the owner. Is she there?
She just called me to say that she was waiting to be let in.
Okay, we'll attend to that. Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
seeing should be Jocelyn now.
She's probably got a prompt on the screen at the moment.
So we're still trying to find Doris Lee. I've got a Jocelyn up on the screen. That's not Doris Lee?
Might be. Yes.
Ah, yes, it is. There you go. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Okay, well, we've got everyone. Just before we start, just go through some basics. Firstly, each of the speakers, you have 3 minutes to speak. You'll be advised when you're approaching that time limit. And I will ask you, because of the number of speakers registered today, I do propose to stick strictly to that time limit. Now, when you do finish speaking, please don't hang up, because the panel may have questions of you. So please be aware of that. Now, this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the council's website. So in that regard, please be aware that because it's being recorded, that may disclose personal information. So if you don't wish this personal information to be disclosed, you'll need to be very, very aware of the fact that it will be, in fact, publicly disclosed at a later date. Now, can I make sure that each of the panels, the speakers to the panel, are able to do so without any interruption, and please just show common courtesy in respect to and to allow each of the speakers to address us uninterrupted. Now, we will hear from each of the speakers, and then we'll consider the other 5 matters on the agenda today, and thereafter we will the meeting will be adjourned, and the panel will further consider each of the 6 items on the agenda, and there'll be a formal report. The formal decisions of the panel will be made available later in the week. Now, in respect to those decisions, it may be that the application will be approved, may be refused, or the panel may defer the application depending on the particular circumstances, but they're the options available to the panel. I think that therefore deals with the relevant procedures, and on that basis we can get the meeting underway, and I'll ask Mr. Holt to address us in respect to his issues with the proposed development at Shellbank Parade. Thank you.
Have you got audio for me?
Yes.
Is my audio working?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to present. Can I walk you through a couple of points in the reporting officer's comments? On page 11, noted the history on the 5th of February. There's a comment that the reduction in scope of the balcony structure from that originally proposed by the elimination of the roof element at the upper level resulted in the panel's view in a structure with minimal amenity impacts on adjoining premises. The panel agreed 3-0 with this statement. This is why the previous DA was approved. It implies that the re-establishment of the roof element raises concerns re amenity. Secondly, on page 23, the 4th step in the tenacity test, a statement where an impact on views arises as a result of non-compliance with one or more planning controls, even a moderate impact may be considered unreasonable. This is the situation here where there is a failure to adhere to council's height planning control. I take you to page 25 and page 27 of the NSDCP 2013, acoustic and visual privacy. The roof will provide shade and weather protection to the upper balcony. However, it is unlikely to facilitate any higher level of outdoor living and associated noise and overlooking due to the narrow nature of the approved balconies in brackets 2.1 metres in depth, close brackets. I make the following points. Shade and weather protection over this balcony is already provided in the previously approved DA. Further protection is not necessary. 2, at this level is immediately adjacent to our living room and looks directly into it. Any increase in use is to be deprecated. 3, the balcony width is immaterial. Our balcony at this level is only 1.8 metres deep, and yet it is adjacent to our major living area and has considerable use. If you want to look on page 4, a description of the proposal shows up the width of our balcony. I take you to page 31, Senior Counsel's opinion, which I have obtained, a copy of which is attached to my submission to the panel. The comment that has been made is that the law does not impose an obligation of consistency in decision making, but is highly desirable. I put to you that in this situation where a DA for the whole lot was refused 4-0, that a revised smaller version without this balcony was passed 2-1, and we now have an additional back onto the present DA, which basically returns it to the original one that was refused 4-0. I ask that consistency be maintained. In summary, the last DA was approved because this balcony roof was removed from the application that was rejected 4-0 by Council's local planning panel. There seems little justification for its need to be there, as its functions are already provided by existing structures. It does not comply with Council's building height code. Its presence may encourage increased use of the area, impinging on our amenity, both visual and acoustic. I therefore request that this DA be rejected by the planning panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Questions from the panel members?
I had one question. Brian, Mr. Holt.
Yes,
If
Brian works.
a privacy screen was erected on the side, on the western side of the balcony, what impact would that have? I mean, it might cut down loss of privacy, but would it have it might come with a consequent further blocking of views.
Sorry, did you say the western end? We have to be very careful because this block faces northwest, so it's often difficult to say which end are you talking to, the end closest to my property or the one adjacent to number 2?
You're at number 8, is that right?
Yes, we're 8, yes.
So you're on the western side of the...
no, we're on the eastern side of the applicant.
Eastern side, right, okay. Right.
If you're asking me, would I like a privacy screen on that top balcony level, the answer is definitely no.
Right, okay, thank you.
Ronnie?
No.
No? I've read the submissions that you've made, Mr. Holt, and I understand them, and I don't have any questions for you. And thank you for your submission. As I've indicated, the decision of the panel will be made available later this week. Thank you.
Many thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Spenceley.
Great, thank you very much, panel. I'll keep my submission fairly succinct, as I think Brian, Mr. Holt covered it particularly well. We feel that, my wife and I and family feel that this is effectively makes a little bit of a mockery of the planning process, given that the structure that was refused 4-0 at the original planning, a second lesser proposal was approved, which didn't take into account many of the objections of the neighbours. And then a third proposal, this one being considered, effectively reverts it back to the original process that was voted down 4-0. We think it's overdevelopment. There is an established building line between all of the properties from number 12 to my property number 10, Brian's property number 8, all the way through to property number 2. It's not a council line, but it is a building line with each property stepping back. We're undertaking a major renovation at number 10, and we have deliberately not built forward. This application sets a precedent for covered space, building forward of that established line, which will have impact to the views of the properties either side. So we think the less amount of use of this space that has been approved at the last application is appropriate. The second point we'd like to raise is around privacy. The use of that space impacts privacy to our swimming pool, where my wife, children in swimming costumes. This may not be a big and important point, but we feel that the increased use that the balcony with a roof creates will have impact for us. But certainly, we think that the proposal is getting back to the original process, or the original application by creep. We don't support it. We also don't believe that coming out of the existing building line sets a strong precedence in a world-class area, which will create effectively a race forward to the building line or to the water there. So we're against the proposal on that basis.
Thank you, Mr. Spenceley. Can I just ask you, you probably addressed it, but I was going to ask you about, I suppose, the direct impacts on your property. You raised the issue about you're concerned about privacy impacts. I perfectly understand those. So you don't have a concern about view loss, for example?
Not for us. Really, it's for us. We're set forward as each of the properties from number 12 to 10 to 8 is set back in line right up to number 2. So building forward there is really creates an issue for us around privacy, not around view loss.
Thank you, Mr. Spenceley. Other questions from the panel members? No. Thank you very much, Mr. Spenceley. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
If we can then move on to those speaking for or on behalf of the applicant. Ms. Hayes?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can indeed. Please proceed.
Fantastic. Panel members, council officers and members of the public. My name is Philippa Hayes. I am a town planner with over 25 years experience, and I'm representing the owners of number 6 Shellbank Parade, Cornwall. Also presenting today on behalf of the owners is Mr. Guy Parison, a level 5 arborist, and Mr. Greg Patch, a heritage architect. We support the recommendation provided by council's officers on the subject application. On Monday of this week, I submitted a 1-page letter and a photo to the panel emphasising 2 points that I thought relevant to the assessment of this matter. So I'll not go over the issues covered in that letter, but I would like to address a number of the points made by the objectors. First of all, both of the objectors have said that if this application were approved, it would in effect be an approval of the first application, DA 24219, that was lodged with council. However, as I've put in my submissions to council, new information can change the way an application is perceived, even if the proposal does not alter substantially. This application has altered and new information has been provided. And therefore, there is no reason that this panel cannot assess the proposal on its merits, and if it finds them to be favourable, approve the application. The objector, Mr. Spenceley, said that it was an overdevelopment, that the balcony roof, and we're talking about a 2.1 metre roof, was an overdevelopment. Mr. Spenceley comes from number 10 Shellbank Parade, which has got approval through the courts for a 4 to 5 story development, which will be 5 metres higher than the roof of number 6 Shellbank Parade. And it has balconies, I think, over 4 levels, at least 4 levels, and it has a big rooftop terrace. So I think the type of development that is happening along the waterfront is substantial, and all of them have balconies. Mr. Holt, the objector from number 8 Shellbank Parade, who is the property to the east, he said that the balcony already had shade and weather protection, but that's not correct. The top balcony doesn't have any roof, so it doesn't have any shade and weather protection, and this is exactly what this roof will be providing. It will be providing shade and weather protection to the balcony below, the approved balcony. That's another thing I think I'd like to raise, is the issue of building line was comprehensively addressed, and the balconies were given approval under the last planning panel, and the proposed balcony roof is not coming out any further than the approved balconies. So I can't see that the issue of building line is relevant any more to this application. The other thing I would say with the balcony roof is that a balcony roof doesn't have privacy impacts. It's a non-trafficable balcony roof, and so there are therefore no privacy impacts with the roof. Privacy impacts were comprehensively addressed under the last application, which was approved by the planning panel for balconies. My assessment of this proposal is that it is a minor and low impact proposal. While the proposal does not comply with the height standard, I believe there are environmental planning grounds that justify this, and that the proposal still satisfies the objectives of the height standard and the zone to which it belongs, the E4 environmental living.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up because you're
Yep. That's it. That's it. And if you have any questions.
You know, I do actually. I've got a copy of the addendum that the 2-page addendum that you submitted earlier this week. I just want to ask a question about the photo. That is a photo and not a montage. That's correct, isn't it?
No, that's a photo. Yes, just a photo taken with a 300mm zoom from Northbridge.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that was the case. I just wanted clarification.
Yep.
I don't have. I understand the points that you're making. I don't have any questions. The other panel members have any question of Ms. Hayes? No. Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parisian. You wish to address us on the tree issue, I assume?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman and panel members, and thank you for the opportunity to address the panel. I've just got some brief comments, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I previously inspected the tree in October 2019 and prepared an arboricultural impact report at that time for an earlier proposal for the 2 balconies on the second and the top levels. Whilst that report specifically addressed those 2 balconies, it also considered the potential for the roof and assessed that. And in terms of the roof, the current roof is at the moment is 3.6 metres from the tree, and the extension of the roof over the balcony will be 1.5 metres from the tree at the closest point. There is no potential under wind loading and subsequent movement of the trunk for there to be a conflict between the two. And in terms of below ground impacts, there's no impacts whatsoever on the tree. There is a very minor impact in terms of canopy of one small branch of approximately 30mm diameter. That branch, in conjunction or including some 2 very small branches that would be affected by the previous proposal, would cumulatively impact less than 5% of the tree's canopy. It would be almost a less than minor impact in my opinion. And I would note that the tree has been quite significantly pruned in the past to provide clearance from the dwelling, and that's minimised the need for any pruning now. And that prior pruning did not have any impact of significance on the tree's health. Any additional pruning will be undertaken in accordance with AS 4373, pruning of amenity trees. And I think that's about probably all I've got to say, except that I've just made a note that the addition of a roof over the balcony will help to provide some measure of protection for users of the balcony for branch failures should they occur. And it's not uncommon for small branch failures in gum trees. This is 11-centre gum. It's not uncommon for them to drop small dead wood and small branches. So this would afford some protection from those failures if people were using that top balcony. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. You were just referring to the pruning of that branch, and I've got the draft conditions in front of me. Condition C10 deals with that. So I take it that's that restriction in there in terms of the fact that that's the only branch that needs to be removed. That's an appropriate condition to impose.
Yes, I've reviewed that, and I'm happy to support those conditions. I think they're entirely appropriate. In terms of if the panel needs to have a visual idea of the area of canopy that's impacted, the photograph in the last page of my report, photograph 10 on page 12, shows the roof and the little bit of canopy. I've got a colour photograph here. If anyone wants me to hold it up, I can do so.
Yeah, if you could, page. Sorry, I can have a look. What was it? Did you say page 10?
So it's this small area, small branches in that area there. Can you see that all right?
No.
Joe, just hold it. I'm sorry, our admin people are bringing it up for us, Mr. President.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's his report. It's in his report.
Oh, okay, bring it up on the report. Yeah, so it's just photograph 10 on page 12.
Of your report.
That's correct, yeah.
I'm going to try and find it.
He's got the picture.
No, just go back to him.
Yeah, it's easier.
Hold it up. That's...
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, okay. We'll have a look at that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Don't need that anymore?
Let's have another look now. Bigger.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions to the panel for Mr. President? No. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Patch? You there, Mr. Patch?
He's muted.
Muted. You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Patch.
Again.
Oh,
Done.
go, Patch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes starts now, Mr. Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and panel. My role is basically to advise on the impact on the architectural integrity of the place. In my view, the addition of the canopy roof at the top level will add to the completeness of the structure on the facade. It's basically in line with the Richard Johnson sort of approach to design in terms of being relatively simple and slender, and impacts on views from the water of the building will be very slight because of the extent of canopy of the lemon-scented gum. And the detailing of the structure is quite light, and I've recommended that it be done in a Ferrador light grey so that it doesn't read all that strongly. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Patch. So is there a condition, are you aware about that colour that you just mentioned?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
It's in my initial report.
In your report. Okay, I'll make a note of that. Thank you, Mr. Patch. I've no questions. Panel members, question, Mr. Patch?
Yeah, I just confirm that the balcony that, over which the roof will extend serves 2 bedrooms. I think that's my correct understanding of the plans. And my second question is, it looks from the photographs provided that most of the other dwellings on either side have similar 3 or 4 levels of balconies vertically up from the ground level. Is that my correct understanding?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Patch. Doris Lee, you there? Oh, got the name correct now. Oh, no, sorry, we've corrected your name, Mrs. Lee. You there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Sorry, I can't hear you clearly.
Oh, I said your 3 minutes starts now if you wish to address us.
No, that's all right. I'm okay.
You don't wish to address us on any matter?
I think panel will give the fair go because for the small house, in the line from number 2 to number 12, that's the smallest and lowest house in this way. And I think I do everything according to the law. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any questions in respect to that matter, no. Thank you, Ms. Lee. That concludes then item number 1. We'll, as indicated, we'll make a decision on that. We'll consider that later today, and the decision will be published by the end of the week. Thank you.
Okay, they wish to leave the meeting now.
And you can, if you wish, you can leave the meeting, or if you wish to listen in, you're more than welcome to. Item number 2, we don't have any. Oh no, we do have people who seek to address us. We've got David Coyle.
We've got somebody signed in as the Asset Management College. I think that may be David Coyle.
Yes. I'm just being advised that on our screen we've got someone from the Asset Management College. Is that Mr. Coyle?
I can do it now that I can see the screen, so just bear with me.
Yep. No, that's good. Are you ready to address us, Mr. Coyle?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to council today. I must admit we've been impressed with our dealings with council and staff so far, and we've found the process quite seamless and effective. We're proud to be proposing this high-level architectural solution. We believe that the design respects the character of the area, and we're pleased that the architect that we've engaged has been able to get a design that has no issues associated with overlooking any of the neighbours. There's no overshadowing of any of the neighbours, no loss of view for any of the neighbours. And in our opinion, and in the opinion of people that we've shown the plans to, it actually improves the streetscape, and it will also improve the views of the neighbours that live in the tall tower behind our property. And that's all I would like to say.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. We do have a question, or I have a question about, if you've read I assume you've read the council report and the recommended conditions of consent. There's a condition AA, the deferred commencement condition. Are you content with that condition, or do you otherwise have a view about it?
No, we welcome the opportunity to talk with the neighbours and about that fence. We note that the fence at the moment looks like it's about to fall over rather than need to be demolished. And yeah, so we're quite content to talk with the neighbours and engage with them, and we look forward to the opportunity to come up with a workable solution.
Thank you. Other questions from the panel members?
I just had a question about that, the fence.
Yes.
Entirely on your client's property, or including the foundations, or does it intrude into the property of the apartments behind?
The fence is actually, it appears to be along the, not so much on the boundary, more on the property, the apartment tower behind.
So the fence is, some of the fence extends onto the adjoining property.
Correct.
Right.
But
And
in any
has
case,
a consent obtained from the adjoining property for the works? Because what I'm trying to discover is if any of the proposed works extend onto an adjoining property, even foundations, then you need the consent of the adjoining owners. In this case, the strata of the apartments to the south.
yes. So none of the works that we're doing on our site impacts or extends onto the land that is owned by the strata to the south.
Okay, right.
Yep.
No, just because that's good. It's been.
Yeah. Sorry. We were just having a discussion amongst ourselves. Mr. Coyle, the issue we have, Mr. Pickles has pointed out, is that if you lodge a development application that relates to certain land and development is proposed to be carried out, and that includes demolition, that you must have the consent of in writing of the owner of that land. So it's a question of, and from what you've told us about that existing brick fence, because it may well be on, or it is on the adjoining property, that adjoining property owner, being the owners corporation, needs to give their consent to the application. We will need to have a think about how we can address that. We will have a discussion about that, but I suppose we've put you on notice that's something that's it's a matter we need to address. It's not perhaps fundamental to whether the application gets approved or refused, but it is a matter that we need to have a look at.
Noted. Yep. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Gina Contini is the owner.
Yes. The owner. Yes.
Yes. Would you like to address us, Ms. Contini?
Unmute.
Go on.
You have to unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
You need to unmute yourself, Ms. Cortini. Contini. Ms. Contini, are you there?
Yeah.
Her video camera's not on, that's the only thing.
Yeah. What's happening? Because the microphone's come on.
Ms. Contini, are you there?
Is there? Yeah, nothing's happening because you've got rid of the mic.
Can you still hear us, Mr. Coyle?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I can see that she's switched her mute off. I thought that Gina might be watching, but I didn't know if she had intended to address council at all. I think she's more just the very...
Okay, just, an interested party. Okay. Well, on that basis, I mean, we've heard from you. We don't think we'd have any questions of her anyway. So, so on that basis, I think we'll if you can let her know that. And as I indicated previously, this matter will be considered by us later today, and a decision will be available by the end of the week. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
Move on to item number 3. 182 186 Blues Point Road at McMahon's Point. I have on my list Paul Rappaport, the applicant's heritage consultant. Are you there, Mr. Rappaport?
I'll let him in. Yep. Oh, he's the same. He hasn't got any. He's here. Oh, hang on.
He's muted at the moment.
He'll have to unmute himself.
Mr. Rappaport, are you able to unmute yourself?
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rappaport. You're the heritage consultant for the applicant?
Correct.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes to address us.
We're talking about the staircase in the...
Sorry, yeah, if you can get that, 182, 186 Blues Point Road, McMahon's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Personally, I don't have a problem with the link. I think it's an adaptive reuse of an existing heritage building. I don't think it diminishes. I think it enriches the significance of the structure. So it's not taking anything away. It's in fact adding by way of adaptive reuse to that building. So that's our position, my position.
Thank you, Mr. Rappaport. That's short and sweet. Any questions from the panel?
No, thank you.
No. Thank you, Mr. Rappaport. I actually have a second heritage consultant on behalf of the applicant. Is it Sienna De Giovanni Arundel?
Yes, she's here with me.
Oh, she's right. Oh, okay. Does she wish to address this, Mr. Rappaport?
Do you wish to say anything?
The only thing is the significance of the building really lays in the external form and the bulk and the facade of the building. Yep. So as the works would be internal, it would really retain the significance tied to the form of the building.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we also have Chris Ferreira, the applicant's planner. Are you there, Mr. Ferreira? Or is it,
I am.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, if you get 3 minutes to address this, if you wish to take up that time.
No, all I wanted to say was to thank the assessment officers for the work they've done, and to say that on behalf of the applicant, we agree with the recommendation and the conditions imposed. And I'm here to answer any other questions, non-heritage related, if there were any. Yeah.
From my point of view, I don't have any questions. I was going to ask you about the conditions. You've indicated that you're content with those. The panel is fully aware of probably the technical reasons for the clause 4.6 request. We will consider that. Are there any questions from the panel?
No, I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferreira. Thank you, Mr. Rappaport and Mrs. Giovanni Arundel.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 4, 2/146 Karuba Road at Karuba Point.
I don't seem to have Kenny.
Kenny Russell from, I think, a Total Concept Landscape Architects. Are you there, Mr. Russell, at all?
Doesn't seem to be there.
No? Okay. All right.
It's under another name, Paris.
Steve.
Nope. Okay.
Is there anyone online who wishes to address the panel on this matter?
I think it was only the one speaker nominated.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. All right, if that's the case, then we'll move on to item number 5, which is the first of the planning proposals relating to numbers 50 to 56 Hutchison Street, St Leonards. I have a number of people on behalf of the proponent that wish to address us. First on my list is Christoph Charkos. Christoph from Urbis. And so, are you there, Mr. Charkos?
You'll need to unmute himself.
Oh, you'll need
Yes,
to
yes, I am.
Can I just ask, what's your qualifications, Mr. Charkos?
So my qualifications, I'm a town planner and I work at Urbis.
Yep. Good. Now, I've got the Urbis bit. I just wasn't sure what you did. Okay, you've got 3 minutes to address us, Mr. Charkos.
Okay, thank you very much, and I do appreciate the opportunity to discuss the planning proposal for 52 to 56 Aitchison Street. We'll try to keep the discussion points succinct. Just like to note that we generally endorse Council's assessment report and its recommendations for the planning proposal to proceed to Gateway, and like to thank Council for the manner in which they have undertaken their assessment. We'd just like to discuss 2 matters within Council's recommendation, and these matters being the recommended height of the planning proposal to be amended to 56 metres, and also the recommendation that the planning proposal is only to be forwarded to the Department for Gateway upon satisfactory negotiation of the contents and detailed terms of the VPA. Now, also online, we have Stephen Jameson, the architect from Carn Finch, and I might just, if I can ask to pass on to him to discuss building height, I might then just dovetail back in, and if the panel is happy with that, to discuss the second matter in relation to the VPA.
Okay, sorry, so Stephen Jamison, you're the architect, is that right?
That's correct. I'm the principal of Carn Finch. So I was the architect involved in the design of this project.
Okay.
So the only issue that I wanted to touch on is the height of the building. So the current design has an overall height of, an overall RL of 147.1, which equates to a height of 58.1 metres above the street. The Council has requested that the height be restricted to 56 metres. The only issue is that that additional height is required to accommodate the lift overrun. And whilst Council has indicated that that could be dealt with through the DA process with a Section 46 exemption or exception, we just wanted to make sure that or give more certainty to us being able to get that exception approved, because at the moment the lift overrun is required to be at that height because the lift is also serving the roof level, and the roof level has a public area that's used by the residents of the building, and if we were to reduce the lift overrun, it would obviously preclude being able to get access to that roof other than using a stair. And obviously that would be inequitable from an access point of view. So whilst we're prepared to accept the 56 metre height, we wondered if it could be acknowledged that there will need to be some additional height to accommodate the lift overrun, and it's just the lift overrun, nothing else.
Can I just jump in here? It's Christoph again. I guess we're just concerned with the risks of the recommended approach within the report to the applicant seeking additional height under clause 4.6. Just noting, I guess, that it's becoming increasingly difficult to justify height variations and also satisfy the relevant Land and Environment Court test for 4.6. And this is just made probably even more difficult in the fact that in circumstances where the height control has been recently changed via an LEP amendment. And I mean, given that we're sort of got this opportunity to amend the controls to facilitate the maximum height, it seems like the right opportunities are set it so that lift overrun can be facilitated. And we see this could be done via an additional local provision, which allows for the additional height for the lift overrun only. We note that Council in their report are concerned about the ability to squeeze a potential extra storey above 16 stories to the building. This is, in our view, controlled by the maximum GFA that's going to be put forward by the planning proposal. And also there'd be quite a few amendments required to the envelope to actually be able to facilitate an additional story, and it's not necessarily the best design outcome. And as Stephen mentioned, you know, the height for the lift overrun is to access a communal open space area, which will add to the amenity, the overall amenity for the residents within the building. So we believe that there's a recommended there's a solution there. There's a potential middle ground via an additional local provision should the panel and council accept to go down that pathway.
Thank you. Yeah, I must say I struggle with the fact that you can't do both height limits and story controls. Well, that doesn't seem to be something that the Department of Planning permits. I can certainly appreciate the matter that you're grappling with, and we'll have to grapple with it as well.
Yeah.
Are there any other matters, Mr. Chapos, that you wish to address us on?
Yeah, the second matter just I raised quickly was the voluntary planning agreement, and we note that the current recommendation states that the planning proposal only be forwarded for gateway determination upon the satisfactory negotiation of the contents and detailed terms of the VPA. We at this point in time, you know, we note that the contribution amount is not in question. That's been agreed by both the applicant and council, and it's really only the detailed technical clauses of the VPA that require any further negotiation. And we note that the revised letter of offer was originally submitted to council on 4th December last year. And so that's 6+ months, and we only received council's response and draft offer on the 18th of June. So I guess we're concerned about any further delay to the assessment of the proposal, and given the current climate, you know, and the time that's likely to be, that the proposal is likely to be under assessment by the department, you know, we really don't see any reason to further delay that assessment by not forwarding the proposal for gateway determination until those detailed clauses of the VPA are negotiated and finalised. You know, we understand why council are doing it, and we appreciate it. You know, we're not against that, but at the same time, you know, we really feel that given the time that this proposal has been under assessment, and the VPA has been being considered, that it stands to reason that, you know, we would seek that the assessment take place concurrently to those negotiations. It'll only be able to go on exhibition post gateway anyway, and that exhibition will require all those matters to be addressed. So we feel there's adequate and ample time to resolve those matters whilst it is being assessed.
Right. Please don't take this as a criticism, but wouldn't you have, or shouldn't you be drafting the VPA? Wouldn't that speed things up?
No, well, we submitted our letter of offer, and we only received a response to a week and a half ago from council. Right. So we would put back, I guess, negotiate further terms on it. I guess that we're fine to come back with that as soon as we can. But the negotiation of the finer points may take a few back and forwards to get it exactly right. But we note that the numerical amounts are not in question. It's just the negotiation of the specific clauses within the VPA. And so that's likely to take time. We believe that can take place concurrently to the proposal being forwarded to Gateway should it be resolved to do so.
Thank you. I understand that clarification.
Yeah.
I have some other people listed here to address this, but I'm just wondering whether that's a full. I've got Peter Strudwick from Urbis as well. Does he wish to address this separately?
Peter can't make it today, okay. Unfortunately. He does send his apologies.
That's fine. Thank you. That's and I've got here Michael Tan from the Epic Leisure, the proponent. Do you wish to address us, Mr. Tan?
He'll need to unmute himself.
You'll need to unmute yourself, Mr. Tan.
Oh, yeah, there he is.
Do you wish to address us, Mr. Tan?
Unmute.
You need to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because I can't listen to it.
hey, are you there, Mr. Tan? No, you.
Yeah, I don't believe he wants to. Or
Okay,
needs to
no,
address it.
no, worries, no. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no, he's sitting in and listening, I believe.
And I've got Jordana Klisarova.
Gordana doesn't need to address the
Okay,
panel.
no worries. No, that's good. Now, okay, are there any other, Mr. Charkos, Mr. Jamieson, are there any other matters before we wrap it up?
Not from our point. I think that we've raised everything that we need to raise. I believe, Stephen.
No, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions from the panel?
Could I ask a question, Christopher? In my years on this panel, I don't think I can recall one case where a simple extension to accommodate a lift overrun for access to a community area has been rejected. I just wonder if you could clarify. You mentioned that it's becoming increasingly difficult to assume that a 4.6 would be supported. I just wondered if you could clarify that.
I mean, I appreciate that, and certainly, yes, we have, in our experience as planning consultants, received a fair few clause 4.6 approval of clause 4.6 variations for lift overruns, and yes, they are, I guess, seen in the relatively minor scale of exceedances. I mean, I guess my point there is that having to rely on a clause 4.6 for any variation is a risk. Is a development approval risk, and there are the relevant tests within that 4.6 and whether the standard compliance is unreasonable and unnecessary in the circumstances of the case, and whether there's sufficient environmental planning grounds to warrant the variation. Now, whilst I believe that we can certainly address both those matters, to extend that height, by virtue of an LEP amendment when the LEP amendment is on the table, seems to be a more logical step forward, rather than having to rely on, I guess, a clause 4.6 variation.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the panel?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charkos, Mr. Jamieson. As I indicated, we will consider this matter later this afternoon, and our, I suppose, recommendation stroke advice to the council will be in a report published later this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and appreciate your time and considering this matter.
Yeah, thank you. And that brings us to the final matter. Sorry, final matter on today's agenda, and I think we've got a few people to speak to us now. I did note earlier in the week there was a discussion, and bearing in mind the number of people on behalf of the applicant who do wish to address us, I think I indicated that it would be appropriate in the circumstances to allocate a block time to the applicant's representative. I suggested a period of 20 minutes. I have here, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people speaking on behalf of the applicant. Now, I've got a number of people up on the screen. Is Michael Harrison, are you there, Mr. Harrison?
He's
yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can indeed. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I've got Paran Trethaway, the traffic engineer. Is he?
Hello.
Yes.
Paran is ready here to answer questions. There'll just be 2 of us talking, mainly for a presentation to you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. So we've got a representative from the applicant, Greg Reed. Are you here, Mr.
Yep. Then I'll be controlling the presentation for Michael.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Greg.
And Greg represents the owner of the building.
Yep.
Thank you. Got a urban planner, Paris Wojcik, is it? Wojcik?
Yes, Wojcik. Yes, I'm here.
Wojcik. I'll write that phonetically. And you wish to address us, Ms. Wojcik?
Yes, if any questions are raised, yes, I can answer those.
And I have, is it Hoyty Somerville?
Jyoti Somerville.
Jyoti. I mean, the pronunciation. You're the heritage consultants on behalf of the proponent?
That's right, yes.
And do you wish to address us separately?
Yes, and well, to answer particularly any questions.
And Jyoti will also give you a presentation on part of the heritage component.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I might note at the outset, thank you for the comprehensive reply document that we've received, and to indicate, I'll hold it up. We had an electronic version earlier in the week, but we came to the panel meeting today and been provided with a paper copy. I won't say anything about the quality of the paper. It's very good, and thank you for the submission. It is helpful, and will help us, and will help. Yeah, and the model as well will help us help guide us. I will leave it to you, Mr. Harrison, to I suppose take the running with respect to the matters that you wish to address us on. We, as you probably expect, have a number of questions for you and the applicant or the proponent's representatives. So on that basis, if you can please commence your address.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say we've also have John Currow here, who's from Harry Sider and Associates, the architects.
Sorry, John Currow, is it? Currow?
C-U-R-R-O, Currow.
Thank you, Mr. Currow. Thank you.
No. So if there's any questions about the architecture, if there's any questions about the architecture, then John's here. So that's good that you've got the model, because I was concerned with that would make it into the room because it's quite big. If I can just, what I want to do is pretty much do a page turn. I'm quite happy to just do it with you with the printed copies on the table. If you want to have a shared screen as well, we can do that so that you can see the up on the screen.
That's okay. So we've all got printed copies, and I think a page turn will be easy, Mr. Harrison. Thank you.
Okay, so if we start on page 2, which is the executive summary. While there's a lot of text there, I'll try and be as brief as I can. And have you had a chance to you might not have had a chance to actually read through this document yet, is that correct? Because we would have only got...
Oh, no, we have. So we were given an electronic version earlier in the week, but the paper one, as I say, came to us today, and being the format that it is, we've all flicked through it and had a good look at it today as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, that makes it easy for me. So on page 2, the first column, item 1, we just want to put a few issues in front of the panel because we feel that it needs some explanation. There's a driving statement in the council's assessment report that talks about the metro station not being a key driver. It very much has been a key driver for this planning proposal, and that's been reinforced by statements from the Independent Planning Commission. The second point is there was the assessment report said there's no clear and definitive public benefit offering that they could understand. The offering is, I thought, quite clear. It's basically that there's $4.75 million in either monetary contribution or for affordable housing on the site. The idea was to get for affordable housing either on the site or elsewhere for the council's discretion. And also there's a dedicated through-site link. So those two are very clear. The monetary contribution came about through Hill PDA, Martin Hill, doing a voluntary plan agreement strategy based on ministerial guidelines, and so it's why that was done. I guess part of the public benefit is the number of construction jobs and the economic benefit of the project, and that's just listed there that Martin Hill estimated about 1,284 construction jobs during the 2 to 3 year construction period of the project. Then the third point on that left-hand column is we feel that there's been some of the issues in the consultants, council's assessment report by their consultants do demonstrate a lack of understanding. And we feel that lack of understanding could easily have been resolved if we were able to meet with the independent, with the council's assessment consultants, planning consultants, which we were not able to do. We made a written request several times to council, and each time they wrote back and said, no, it was not appropriate. So that's the first time I've come across where in planning proposals that are usually quite complex that we've never been able to meet with the council officers or the council consultants in a planning proposal. So we feel that that's, we quite strongly feel that that is a problem. The table identifies the issues coming from the executive summary of the council's assessment report, and the right-hand column is our response. I'll just go briefly through that so you can see where we're coming from. The council says the PP lacks strategic merit. Well, even the IPC, in addition to the North District Planning Panel, agreed that the previous planning proposal for the site had strategic merit. So we're quite surprised by this. The reason why they say it doesn't have strategic merit is because there's a cascading of strategies and documents down to the Ward Street Precinct Plan, which is incorporated as one of the strategies in the local strategic planning statement. So we think it's very much a site-specific issue, how the planning strategies work, and that at the right-hand column basically says that that issue has been addressed already with a larger planning proposal. Some of these things we'll address in a bit more detail as we go through the presentation. The next, I guess, district level, strategic merit level issue was contrary to, was loss of non-residential floor space. And as the North District Plan says that one of their planning priorities is to no net loss of residential floor space. And the answer to that is that, yes, there is a net, some loss of residential floor space, which we will, but within the precinct, that's definitely not the case. And in fact, the local environmental plan only calls for 0.5 to 1 non-residential floor space on the site. So you could do a DA and reduce the commercial floor space quite significantly, whereas we're proposing a non-residential floor space ratio of 3 to 1. So that's, so just common sense should apply there. The second issue arising in the North District Plan is the adverse impact on heritage, which is really a site-specific issue. The district plan just says protect the district's heritage. And if on a site-specific issue basis, our heritage argument is accepted, then this really doesn't become an issue at the district level. Then the third box in the left-hand column doesn't demonstrate site-specific merit. Well, they're actually, when it comes down to it, the previous planning proposal for this site, it was actually approved for site-specific merit by the North District Panel. But the IPC on Council's review, they raised about 4 concerns that they said should be addressed before a suitable building might be appropriate. So they really opened the door to a second planning proposal being submitted for the site, which is this one. So we would have expected the concerns to be quite confined, and we'll discuss that in a bit more. The next point, the increase in overshadowing of solar access on the public domain, that's, I think, a key issue, a driving issue of council, and we'll address that in more detail. The next one, potential increased overshadowing of residential buildings to the east. The feeling was that there wasn't enough information on that, and I'll explain that, well, there is enough information to give you confidence, but certainly more information can be provided at the district planning panel. But I think we've got enough information I can show you about that. And the third one was heritage significance, a site-specific issue. We'll explain that in some detail with the heritage consultant here. And then the last one in the council's executive summary was the inappropriate height with respect particularly to scale and character. And we're arguing about the stepping heights that council has and how we feel we do fit into the CBD strategy in that sense. So unless there's any questions, that's the gist of what the presentation will be, and some of that I'll address in a bit more detail. I'm quite happy to receive questions as we go through, because it helps, I think, for everyone to understand the project. Now, page 3 is and some more comments we have about due process. Does the panel have available to it the 29 attachments to the planning proposal? Because if someone wants to know a bit more detail about the project, those attachments do describe the detail. Have you got those there?
Yes, we do have a copy, Mr. Harrison, is the answer to your question.
Oh, good. Okay, so then just at the bottom of that left-hand column, there's 4 or 5 of the attachments with which they're referred to as B, C, L, etc. So there's the urban design strategy there. There's the heritage assessment. There's the architectural drawings. There's the wind tunnel assessment. There's the housing supply and demand analysis, and there's the economic benefits study. And those 4 or 5 things, I guess, the key attachments as far as giving your advice on the merits of this project or not. Then the top of the second column. I've already mentioned this issue about the PP process being unusual. We haven't been allowed by council to brief anybody or talk to anyone about any misconceptions they might have. Then item C, council does have a conflict of interest on this, on looking at our planning proposal, and I don't think that's been acknowledged in the assessment report. Being the adjacent landowner, being the proponent of sort of the biggest development in North Sydney, there is definitely an issue there. Item D, as I said earlier, the main issues I think should be confined to the IPC issues rather than bringing all these issues up again and clouding what the main issues really are. But I'll be addressing that in a little bit more detail. And item E, it's just a comment that Architectus considers that the planning proposal process, the way this one's been handled, has been a bit of a shortcoming. Planning panels seem to think that they've just got to say yes or no. They're interpreting the minister's guideline to them too conservatively, and that they can request more information. They can put on simple conditions, and that didn't happen. So, because of that, I think lack of understanding early on by the IPC, we've been confronted by this 12-month delay and expense to our clients. Page 4, the planning process to date. So there is a previous planning proposal which was larger than this, or the same height and the same same minimum non-residential FSR. So the actual details of the planning proposal, what we want changed, is the same as the previous one. It's just the architectural concept supporting it, and so the main change in the architectural concept is there's greater separation between the tower and the western neighbours, the 20 and 22-storey buildings immediately to the west of the site. And by having that wider separation, which exceeds the ADG separation, it enables more sunlight into the open space, and it enables the amenity issues that the IPC saw of impacting on the western neighbours to be resolved. And so that simple technique and revision to the architecture has addressed the main IPC issues. On the top right-hand column, presentation that I want to make now is a little information on the current planning proposal, the relevant issues for discussion, a bit more detail on some of those issues, and then additional issues, because a number of issues that council have raised, and certainly raised we've found in the past, raised verbally with the district planning panel, and you might have some of those issues in mind yourself that are just worthwhile giving some explanation to, although I won't dwell on those because they've been accepted by the in the council assessment report as no longer being issues. So the bottom right-hand series of points, the issues that I want to address in detail, is the loss of non-residential floor space. That won't require much discussion. Housing targets, which is an issue that we have put, it's not an issue raised not really an issue raised by the assessment report, but council is constantly saying to anyone that their housing targets are met and they don't need this planning proposal. The overshadowing of the planned public space, the lack of information for assessing shadowing, the heritage impact, inappropriate height, and then we've added an issue at the bottom about the through-site link and Elliott Street, the planned shared zone, which we'll just explain a little bit more about. So if you turn to page 5, part A, the planning proposal. So you can see the images there. The bottom left-hand image is the original planning proposal that went to the North District Planning Panel and then subsequently to the Independent Planning Commission. And so you can see it's a tower that's almost the full width of the existing heritage building at the bottom. And then by increasing the separation, we lose that row of apartments, and so you see the building set back so that the first tall photograph with the coloured stripes down the west side of the building, that's the current planning proposal, and those coloured stripes are actually part of a public art proposal by renowned artist Robert Owen, and which also includes the same sort of design art idea in the colonnade. So you can see it's very much a tower in the Seidler design style as Seidler's office evolved their design work, and the heritage building sits very comfortably, we think, as a podium to the tower above, given the changed circumstances of how urban developments happened in the last, 40 or 40 plus years. The middle photo montage is just looking from the intersection of Miller Street and McLaren Street and how it's in context with the foreground towers, and that it's well set back from McLaren Street itself. So if a pedestrian is walking along McLaren Street, you'd be primarily aware of the heritage item itself and less so of the tower behind because of its narrowness. And then the last tall photo is the view from Ward Street. So Ward Street is the entry to the Ward Street Council car park, and on the right is the substations. And this photograph, this photo montage, shows what we refer to as a widened spine. So in the council master plan, it's narrower than this. I think it's I've got the numbers later on, and this is what we're recommending. It could be wider. It doesn't have to be wider. We're just saying we think from a public domain point of view, it would be more beneficial. It's wide enough to have trees in there. So as part of the greening of Sydney, the more trees, the better. And it also shows a very narrow elevation, the southern elevation of the proposal, and the low angle view of the sky, even when looking from Berry Street. And then if you look at the bottom of the proposal, you can see a coloured column. That is the double height colonnade. And so while the level change between the proposal and Berry Street, there is some level change. It's relatively, if it's all evened out, it's very gentle gradient, and that's all subject to the detailed public domain design. But it's certainly the most level.
Sorry, Mr. Hart, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Hart. You're going to have to be aware, you've used up 15 minutes of your time already. You're going to have to really hit the high points to us. Bearing in mind, I know that your other consultants will wish to address us on various matters. As I sort of indicated, we are restricted by time today. So if you can just take us to you've outlined, I suppose, the significant points you wish to address on. Just give us a bullet point summary if you can.
That's fine. We'll do that. That's fine. So if you turn to page 6, you've got a view of the colonnade there with the artistic expression. If you turn to page 7, there's the plans of the existing building with the extended colonnade all the way through the building. You see the lobbies to the entry and the floor plates of the low rise. When I say low rise, level 2, and then the level 6, which is I think near the top of the building, how the floor plans work. And then and then page 8, it shows the residential floor plate. So the left one is the first up to 20 floors from the top of the level 7 of the office building, And that floor plate is only about 500 square metres, so it's quite a small floor plate. And you can see it's shorter on its western elevation to give view outlook for the residents to the west. And then the floor plate on the right is the upper rise of the tower, and that's around 650 square metres. So also a relatively small floor plate these days. Page 9 shows the stepped form. So you can see the tallest is the council proposed 57-story office tower. And as I say in the report here, 57 stories of offices equals 67 stories of residential. So in effect, you're stepping from 67 stories of equivalent to residential on the council's and Dexter site down to our site at 45 stories, down to the right-hand there, which is 168 Walker Street, which is the DA approval, which is under construction now, as you would have seen before. Page 10 is our tower in context, as seen from the pedestrian bridge over the Brindley Expressway. And we think, I think anyone looking at that would say it looks in context. Page 11, the economic benefits. That's a summary of the benefits that Hill PDA prepared of the project, $323 million contribution to the economy, etc. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Page 12, strategic merit. The first point is about the cascading of plans down the Wall Street Precinct Master Plan. And if you accept our arguments, then that's really doesn't become an issue. Lost non-residential floor space. I think I've explained that sufficiently. There is, in the response there, we feel council is mistaken when they say the gross floor area of the existing building is 10,148 square metres. Our measurement has been 8,674, and that was the measurement the Department of Planning used in their report to the Independent Planning Commission. Nevertheless, I won't go any further on that. I think I've discussed enough. Heritage will address in a bit more detail in the site-specific area. Housing targets. The independent planning assessment, the planning assessment, council assessment report has basically said that even if this development goes over the housing target, it's still a good idea. But Hill PDA have done a study of the local housing strategy and have said that there's actually a supply gap, which our development will help to fill in the next period, 2022 to 2026. Overshadowing of the planned open space, I want to discuss in a bit more detail. I do hope I get more than just 20 minutes because I need a little bit of time to explain this. But I think we'll just go straight to the diagrams. On page 15, you can see the narrow spine that council has in the plan and also in the view to the plan proposal. And that's the top left-hand image. The bottom left-hand images are showing the widened spine, so that we think that's better overall, but obviously not necessary. But the advantage is that from the sunlight point of view, on the right-hand you can see the sunlight penetrates down the spine, but with a wider spine, we get more sunlight at, I guess, the critical time that the IPC said was late morning between 11 and 12. And so at 11:30, we're maximising. I mean, with a slight increase in overshadowing, we're maximising that sunlight to the spine. So just going through on page 16, going through the shadow diagrams, there's a first series with a narrow pedestrian spine. So yes, you can see at 9 o'clock, there's a little bit of extra overshadowing. There's not much at 9:30. So there's that sort of, that period at 9 o'clock where there's a shaft of sunlight. And that would, if there was some development above 12 stories or so on the corner building at 45 McLaren Street, on the corner of McLaren and Walker, that would be done away with. And I don't think it's significant enough to be retained because it's for such a short period of time. 10 o'clock, the open space is completely overshadowed, the slightest couple of square metres there in the corner. At 10:30, there is a little bit of sunlight and we do overshadow most of that. That's probably the worst situation. At 11 o'clock, the sunlight opens up and we do have some overshadowing, but it's a relatively small patch of sunlight. And 11:30, it's not too different. And then on page 18, we just go from 12 o'clock where you see there's sunlight coming through, and then 12:30 that closes right down. So 12 o'clock, there's some sun coming right through and not really affected by our site. So that in the beginning of the lunch hour period, if you like. Then 12:30 right through till 2 o'clock on page 19, completely overshadowed. And of course, completely overshadowed thereafter. So it's quite, if this was a space that you're looking at in central Sydney, you wouldn't put any planning controls on it because it's so badly overshadowed. And even Chifley Square in central Sydney did have some no further overshadowing controls on it, but the council lifted that because it's just not practical that the shafts of light coming through to be protected. And North Sydney Centre and Central Sydney are now considered under the Metropolitan Plan as being the one sort of eastern city, I guess, of the three cities. And there should be some consistency in how these are applied. From page 20 onwards is showing the widened spine. And as you can see, they're just confirming really that situation. I don't need to go any further. And on page 24, it's worthwhile just looking at this. It talks about it. There's three tables. It's a little bit complicated, but the left-hand table on page 24. You've got page 24 in front of you?
Yep.
It just shows at each half hour how much sun there is on the open space under the Ward Street Precinct Plan, under our revised planning proposal, this planning proposal we're dealing with, and under if we had a widened spine. And you can see we've just added just for the sake of comparison, we've just added the amount of square metres of sunlight at each half hour and then totaled them at the bottom. And the precinct master plan in the middle of winter has 4,197 square metres of sunlight, just for comparative purposes. Our planning proposal has 2,900, almost 3,000, and with a widened spine has 3,800. So if it was seen that sunlight is really important to kept at a similar amount, and if it was seen that the spine actually does offer a better public domain amenity, then we've got a good solution. At the spring equinox, you can see the measures there. So we are a bit less at the equinox. I think I do want to point out that the equinox is both in March and in September, and in March can be a very hot month. So as we all know from the Bondi Beach experience with the COVID thing, and it was around, I think, 26th, 27th of March with 37 degrees. So equinox is not necessarily the right time to be looking at sunlight, probably more April to August rather than the equinox, and that's the experience in the city of Sydney. Page 25 talks about the monthly solar analysis there, which is what I've just talked about. But I think the point about reflected light, that second paragraph on page 25, the problem really is that there's no sunshine in the lunch hours period, apart from some right at 12 o'clock. And perhaps there should be a bit more of a lateral sort of thought process and getting some reflected light into the space. Martin Place in central Sydney, they did a study back in the 90s, Barry Webb, who's a lighting expert, and he said, while there's no sun really getting into Martin Place in the middle of winter, there is some reflected light off the northern facades, and that's a good thing from the sandstone facades, there's some warmth, and that's a good thing to maintain. So with the sun access plane put in to control that. So reflected light is something that's worthwhile. The other idea of reflected light is through a heliostat. I'm not normally a fan of heliostats, but where you're looking at mainly paved spaces, and the Central Park development does actually work. It gives a rather soft, muted, comfortable reflected light into the space. It's not hazardous when you look at it, and it's something worthwhile. So the main issue with this mid-block open space, the crucial problem with it is that it is, whether we like it or not, it's greatly overshadowed, and that's the problem with mid-block open spaces. And retaining a couple of shafts of light is not necessarily the right approach. So I think if this is considered such an issue, then some reflected light ought to be thought about. We actually asked Gabriel Maurice of GMU to look at the council's precinct plan and our planning proposal. And she, as I don't know if you know of her, but she's certainly very independently minded. She's certainly very widely respected. And her view was that our proposal of a wider north-south spine was far preferable. One of the main reasons for that was she felt it was much safer than the shared zone on the west side of our building, which council is proposing. So, but then she also said, well, there's actually an even better way of doing this. And she drew up that plan, which is on the right-hand, that image on the right-hand side of page 25. It's basically saying, yes, keep the green plaza to the south side of our proposal, but rather than have the open space in the middle, where it's always going to be compromised, why not have the open space fronting Miller Street? Now, council will say, oh, we've already considered this because we did that as option 1 or option 2 in the master plan and had community consultation, and that was ruled as being as not being the preferred option. But the main reason I think it may not be the preferred option is it relies on a private land holding, and they'd only given the private landholder another 4 or 5 stories on top of their office building. Private landholder is quite happy to relocate and upgrade their office building, but they need higher height and to do that. So the idea of a new plaza on Miller Street shouldn't be off the table. And in fact, being on Miller Street, I think continues the strategy of Miller Place, which is a pedestrian zone between Berry Street and Mount Street, which council has planned in their public domain strategy. And just a further point I want to make about that is I was involved in the master planning of a street block at Circular Quay, the Goldfields House street block between Pitt and George Street, fronting Alfred Street, and all little laneways and right-of-ways, all nothing connecting. And we did a master plan which connected everything up. We said, oh, we'll have a mid-block open space, but we realised it'd be overshadowed. But if people want sunlight, they just walk over to Circular Quay. And in this case, they'll probably be going up to the Ted Mack Park. But then lease came along and got a different land holding than was thought about. And they've moved the mid-block open space over to George Street. George Street's the main spine of the city, and this will be another plaza, sunny plaza along that spine, just as it could be here in Miller Street. So it's not out of the question that private development is not going to work with council and give council what's the best solution. And so this is put there to say that, well, a prominent urban designer actually thinks this is the best solution. Page 26, the configuration of the public domain. The council urban design officers, as quoted in the assessment report, basically say the alternative master plan produced by Architectus is hopeless compared to their own master plan. We only deliver A-grade floor space for offices, they deliver premium grade. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. The site B is on the left-hand, that's a large floor plate that would be the most premium possible office floor plate you could get on the site. That doesn't mean it's not the only way of doing it. The council approach on the right hand of having an L-shaped land with the Dexus land also gets a premium level grade office space in terms of site area. So really, these two ways of developing site B are quite interchangeable. If council prefers the larger central square, that's entirely, it's just that the 4 or 5 points that the urban design officer makes just don't hold water when it's completely interchangeable. Also, one of their points was that they're losing gathering space. Well, gathering space might better be up at Ted Mack Park where it's actually sunny, but nevertheless, in this mid-block area, if they want the larger space, they can. Another point they make is our master plan doesn't consider having a community hall, which is proposed in Site B. Well, of course, the community hall can be above ground level, which would be better rather than having the hall at street level, or it could be below ground, any sort of configuration, and could work either way. So a lot of those criticisms don't hold water. We're getting through it now. Page 27, the issue was not enough information for overshadowing eastern neighbours, and they said 49 McLaren Street and 144 to 150 Walker Street. So if the left-hand shadow diagram there, it shows the 10:30 a.m. sunshine. So you can see the top in the right-hand corner of that left-hand diagram is 49 McLaren Street. That's the 4 or 5 story residential building, brick building on the corner. Then the next building down is 144 to 150 Walker Street. And that's the 3 or 4 heritage buildings, and then they've got an intervening 6-7-storey apartment building behind those little heritage buildings fronting Walker Street. So you can see there at 10:30, although the eastern elevation of all those apartments are in sun. Certainly 140, 450 Walker Street, all the apartments faced east. So the living rooms and main bedrooms face east. And even 49 McCarran Street on the corner, all the apartments faced east except that the northwestern one. And you'll notice that shadow coming across it, that's coming from 168 Walker Street. So we can say between 9 o'clock and 10:30 and almost to 11 o'clock, maybe quarter to 11, that all of those apartments are getting sunshine. So the 2 hours that's required by the apartment design guide, they are getting. So, so just on looking at those shadow diagrams, it's easy to understand that they'll be getting the ADG requirement. Obviously, if that's being raised as an issue, we'll do more investigation of the floor plans of those apartments. And but I think that that's clear that it really falls away as an issue. Page 28 is the heritage. I'll just do I'll ask Jyoti to speak to the next page, but this page basically says that Peter Romey was engaged as the heritage consultant for council. I must say he only was engaged about a week before the 90-day period was up before we can lodge a review to the Department of Planning for the District Planning Panel to assess the project, would make a decision on the project. And I don't know why they were commissioned so late in the process. Of course, one suspects they were consultant shopping and find someone that could agree with their predetermined position. But even so, Peter Romey has listed 6 conditions. If the gateway was to go, if this was to go ahead, this project, he lists 6 conditions. All of those conditions we have already, that was our intention, certainly agree with. A couple of minor comments there, but nothing substantial. And you can see the bottom right-hand diagram is obviously the elevation of the east elevation, showing the step nature of the existing building. I might just ask Jyoti, the heritage consultant, to just respond to page 29, because it's very interesting hearing directly from her. Do you want to sit here?
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. You'll be pleased to hear I'll be fairly brief on this because I've been working on this building since 2017, when, if you like, the development was just a gleam in the owner's eyes. And I was brought in from the start because it was recognised, firstly, that the site did have a heritage listing and that the association with Harry Seidler was of particular importance. Now, as you'll find from the existing listing, there's very little information in that listing, but it was basically a flagging mechanism. There's even an error of fact. It lists it as a 5-storey building, but both Peter and I have picked up on that, on that problem. So one of the issues became, what is the role of a middle-late century building by Harry Seidler in the North Sydney context, which has undergone not only a dramatic change of context, but is showing the effects of its 1970s construction period. Now, it was all of those of us who were alive in the 70s and working with buildings. We know that the 70s was not a particularly good period for concrete technology. Some of it was experimental. Some of the materials were still being explored and made better. So one of the things I do want to stress in the background of this heritage assessment and the analysis that's been done in the various reports that GML has done and the advice we've given, is that this is a 20th century building that is dealing with one of the bugbears of 20th century heritage conservation, which is early concrete and cement technology. And this is a massive situation that's occurring around the world. And in fact, this year's Equinox conference, which has now been cancelled because of COVID, was going to have an international symposium on the conservation of concrete structures, because it's recognised that this is an area of new exploration, of technological challenges, and it doesn't respond well to the approaches that we've taken to traditional brick, stone, timber structures to date. So this is all underlying the fact that we start with the analysis of the building, which was done in the first assessment, and that is, I think, included as an appendix to the Heritage Impact Statement. And it was done while the design was evolving, and we worked very closely with Harry Seidler and Associates to look at what is it about the design aesthetic, about the design technology, about the relationship of the design to its then context that makes this building particularly special, and then what are the relative significances of all its different aspects. And all of that is very much Borough Charter 101. So we come up with the fact that, and I think there's no disagreement, that we have a very significantly designed set of facades, the 3 facades. They relate brilliantly to the street and to pedestrian scale. The greening, the setbacks, the design methodology, the design aesthetics. And for example, the issue of the elevation that fronts the waterfront, the east elevation, is a particularly interesting one that has not been addressed, but that's being retained. So, and now we come to the fact that underpinning, if you like, or supporting all this wonderful but deteriorated exterior condition is a very, very deteriorated, and I think Harry would be the first person, Harry Seidler would be the first person to agree, substandard interior. This is not a structure such as the North Sydney Council Chambers with significant structural elements or forms or detailing. And we're talking about the 5-storey component. We're not talking about the front 3-storey component because we've dealt with that. So here we have structures, a structural system which is just basically slabs and columns, which is failing considerably. And there are scores of reports by the engineers, and you can see it when you come to the site. So if we acknowledge that, yes, we need radical surgery, but we need to keep what is important, again, standard conservation principles, then can we use the removal of that structure and the necessary replacement of it with new structure to support and enhance the conservation of the existing building? And that is what we believe we have achieved. And so that is our address to the interior of the building. The fact that now we are in a different context, the first issue is the relationship to its immediate setting. We have the potential to develop on this site. We are surrounded by towers. I think some of the images that have been shown by Michael Harrison about what is proposed, particularly to the south, render this site particularly vulnerable to being totally overwhelmed. And the podium use of the building to support a distinctive, architecturally developed design reflecting not 70s Seidler design and aesthetics, but 21st century design and aesthetics as designed through the office procedure and as supported particularly by Penelope Seidler, who is now the copyright and moral rights owner of his work, means that we have deliberately presented the fact that here we have an opportunity to interpret and present in legible form both the 70s aesthetic and architectural vocabulary in a very legible form. I mean, I challenge any pedestrian to walk past that building in its proposed form and not read the integrity of the 7-story podium as an entity from 3 elevations from the public amenity, from the public realm, in the manner in which it was meant to be presented. The fact that we now have a very different setting and that will continue to be developed with even more large, massive structures. This is an opportunity to provide quality. And I think that this is the most important thing that we're getting about the scale, the impacts on the existing building. Harry Seidler would have been the first person to say, and he did, he said to me, you know, I've got the recording of the evidence that pull out the bits that don't work, pull out the fabric, the structural elements that can be improved on, and let's improve the amenity, the design, exploit this, this association with Seidler to show him both at his explorative best in the 70s, but the way that his architecture evolved as he was simultaneously moving into tall structures. And we have his buildings in the city, which demonstrate his juxtaposition of small, I'm working also on MLC at the moment, the smaller low buildings in the foreground as podiums for taller structures. So I think that both the assessment of significance that we have done, which has gone way beyond anything that the council's listing suggested, that the significance of the building, I think your independent consultant has essentially agreed with the degree to which we have identified aspects of significance. I think where we're differing is the impacts of the proposed development. And my understanding both of contemporary heritage practice working in the 20th century with these new technological problems and the new city contexts that heritage has to work in, and the understanding that Harry Seidler brought to his own buildings of continually investigating and supporting the city structure through good design, through exemplary design. I think that what we've done is that we've supported the historic and associative significance of this building with Harry Seidler by keeping everything that points to his work, his associations, and we have improved, or we have built on that, I won't say improved, we've built on that in a positive way by making an exemplary building in a sympathetic design aesthetic to support it and to balance it, to allow it to take its own new presence in the city. Is that up? Is that where any questions?
No. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Somerville. Mr. Harrison, you're really going to have to hit the high points. Bearing in mind, we have already looked at this document, so just please just take us to the very high points towards the end. So we had the advantage of having a look at it earlier the day before we.
We're very quick now. That the two main issues that open space, the shadowing of the open space and the heritage has been dealt with. In terms on page not numbered, but it's page 30, I guess. Page 30 or 31 is height, so it's number 9, height, and the diagram adjacent to that is showing our building, as I said before, midway between the two that I talked about. They've got the RLs there, they're stepping down, and there's also a suggestion of item D of if the building on the corner is as successful with its planning proposal as council has invited it to be, then what a sample height might be.
Sorry, Mr. Harrison, can I just ask you, how many stories as approved is 168 Walker Street?
It's 28 stories, and the ground floor is 1 floor above McLaren Street, so it's equivalent to 29 stories.
Right, thank you.
If you go to the following page, which doesn't have any page number, it has photo montages taken from south and north along the freeway, where most people will see the cityscape. So it shows the project in, I guess, in its local context. It's pretty easy to understand. It sort of fits in with all the proposed planning envelopes. Page 33, I just want to quickly talk about the shared zone on the west side of 40 on McLaren Street. We have the transport or traffic consultant here to just say a brief few words about it. But fundamentally, it's a less safe solution, and our colonnade does provide a safer solution and an alternative and a more direct route for pedestrians. So, just Paran will just say a few words on the safety side.
Hello. So yeah, I'll start off with just a bit of context. I'll keep this as short as I possibly can, and I think largely because it can be covered in a short amount of time. But essentially, what we have is there's a strategic pedestrian route that runs north-south through the CBD, effectively starting at the North Sydney Oval in the north, from Elliott Street, running virtually central between Miller and Walker Street, all the way south through so goes past Metro Victoria Cross North Station, goes past 41 McLaren Street, through the proposed squares of Ward Street Precinct and onto Berry Square, and then further south from there. So this is a very strategic pedestrian route. We've worked on a number of developments in the area. We've often had to look at how we accommodate this desire line for pedestrians. And so when you think about it in that context, and you look at its components, certainly the ones local to the site, the section of the route, we'll just talk about the route for the moment, that goes from effectively the metro station in the north to the square of the Ward Street precinct. There's really two options that are on the table for how this is provided. The one that council's adopted is a shared zone implementation of Elliott Street. So that would be obviously the mixing of vehicles and pedestrians in that area. Or the alternative is to run the dedicated pedestrian route from through site link in the 41 McLaren Street site. So, I mean, first of all, just from in terms of the main concern for me is pedestrian safety, basically. And so when I think about pedestrian safety, I don't have to go far. I can look at the RMS guide to shared zones, and it says quite clearly that in every instance, the safest option is a dedicated pedestrian option. Really, the use of shared zones are areas where accessible land for pedestrians is limited. And in those limited occasions, what can you do? And ultimately, you have to share the road space with pedestrians. That's not the case here. So in that sense, if there are these two options, then certainly for me, the preference purely on safety, we don't want anybody injured, certainly don't want anybody killed, then the dedicated pedestrian route is undoubtedly the preferred option. But the second thought I had to it is to look at it from, well, how would this perform as a shared zone, even if you wanted to provide it as well as the dedicated pedestrian zone. And from my observations and from looking at the new building there, the major concern I have is that really it's a service laneway. That's how it is operated. I understand you can see the photos showing service vehicles that are parked up in the laneway. And really what it comes down to, my professional concern is that these service vehicles, no matter how they enter and use Elliott Street, as it is now and as it would be in the future as a shared zone, was that they would have to undertake some form of reversing. Currently they do it in two fashions. There's a driveway midway along where vehicles go in and do a 2 or 3 point turn. And of course they either reverse into that access or reverse out of it. Or as what's commonly seen is they reverse in it from McLaren Street down it. And if you go through the guidelines to a shared zone, it talks about the design process you go through. It states quite clearly that reversing of vehicles is undesirable. And that's talking about cars parking, not even talking about trucks. It talks about the principles to look at safe servicing and what that constitutes. And I can tell you now that reversing within a shared zone does not constitute a safe servicing outcome. And really, it's my conclusion that if there was at some stage this was intended to put forward an application for a shared zone, that it would not pass the requirements needed in order for it to perform that function. So again, under that scenario, then really the only option that is both safe and I think feasible and deliverable would be the dedicated pedestrian route going through 41 McLaren Street to maintain this strategic pedestrian north-south route running through the CBD.
Thank you, and I'll just finish off. I'll just finish off unless you have any questions on what Haran has said. Page 35 shows the colonnade again as the alternative route. And then following up, that is part C, the additional issues. The first one about amenity to the western neighbours, that's been, the assessment report said that's been addressed okay, but some information is there if you would like to read it. The page 37 shows the separation between the revised proposal compared to the previous one, quite clear, and that's why those advantages ensue. The following page is not numbered, but the following page, it talks about wind effect, and so the wind tunnel test was done. The assessment report accepts that. There is only one location which has an issue, and that should be able to be designed out in the DA stage. The design of the proposed, one of the issues that council has raised is how you can guarantee the design, because planning proposals just deal with some numbers and that's it. And you've got a whole architectural concept here and can't be guaranteed. Well, the VPA will commit to Cider Office being the designer. The heritage work that's been done by Jyoti reinforces the need for the Cider design. And so there's a number of ways where it can be, if not guaranteed, very closely guaranteed. The third issue that people raised was the view impacts on the western neighbours, and there's plenty of information in the planning proposal attachments for the whole view impact study, which was accepted by the assessment report. The council moratorium on planning proposals, obviously that hasn't been accepted by the state government. So the next page is the last page, and that's the conclusion. And we're strongly of the view that our planning proposal supports all the various government objectives, including the objectives and principles of the Ward Street Master Plan. We've gone through that master plan carefully. I have on many occasions. And there's nothing there that talks about solar access amenity to the open space, probably because it was always thought mid-block open space. Certainly, the more solar access, the better. But it's not exactly one of the objectives and principles. So there's a number of, we've listed a number of key benefits there. Most of them have already been talked about. But I guess I would like to just point out two or three. There's objective or benefit in the middle column, K and L. L, the willingness for us to consider a heliostat on the building if people felt getting some sunlight or reflected light into the lunch hour period is a good idea, which of course it is a good idea. But that could happen off Council Dexter's Tower as well, so it's totally within Council's control. And of course, if our planning proposal was successful, we believe it'd be quite expedient timing. We would aim at exhibiting the development application along with the planning proposal. And so therefore, that's also another way of guaranteeing the quality of the design. So on that basis, if there's any questions, I noticed the 1:500 scale model you've got in the room. It's worthwhile having a look at that. I think as part of that, there's a building you can manipulate it so that you can see the wider spine or the narrow spine. You can see the change in level between the plaza and the Elliott Street shared zone, and that needs to be accommodated, whereas our colonnade is the most easiest gradient for pedestrians and the most direct. So that's all evident when you have a look at it. So I guess open it to questions. Sorry for it taking so long, but we've obviously been involved in this for such a long time, and it's pretty difficult to keep it all to 20 minutes.
Mr. Harrison, I've got one question for you that's really exercising my mind, and that's to do with this widened spine.
Yes.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is some other proposal needs to be amended in order to make yours more acceptable. Is that a fair summary or not?
No, I don't think so. I think that I think that the fact that the shafts of sunlight in the public open space are quite meagre now, and a little bit of extra shadowing from our proposal, which we've done a fantastic job of minimising that. I think that's just acceptable as is. In terms of the wider spine, my view is that a wider spine is better as a visual connection between Berry Street and McLaren Street, and people can see through to the link of the colonnade, and you can plant trees in it, and it could be a much more comfortable spine. So my view from an urban design point of view is that a wider spine is better. It also has the ability of, if the sunlight was considered such a crucial thing, then it can just compensate. But you'd only do that. I think the Dex's council development needs to go through a lot of design evolution and options and concepts. It may well suit them to be wider, or it may not, or it may not. So we're just saying that it's something to think about, and not to say that anything relies on it.
Okay. Questions from panel members?
Mr. Harrison, I had a question about the one of the key issues to do with the heritage assessment of the proposal is the fact that Council's heritage consultant came to the conclusion that the tower over the top of the existing heritage building forms an uncomfortable and incompatible relationship between the tower and the 7-storey building. I was wondering if you could point us to any examples, recent examples in the city or Parramatta of elements where towers have been built above existing heritage buildings, such that the result is we can understand the result more clearly.
I might ask Jody to respond to that, but my first comment is, yes, there's many examples in central Sydney where modern towers have been built behind and above 3- and 4-storey and 5- and 6-storey heritage frontages. So I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but I'm sure Jody will think of one or two.
I think this is a very, very important question, and it's something that we, Harry Seidler and GML, pass backwards and forwards. And one of the things we've made a point of, and which I tried to get across in my hopefully brief presentation, was that this is one of the few opportunities where we have the unique, and I will use that word in its true sense, opportunity for the original architectural practice to work with both the original building and the other buildings. So we're actually making that a part of the significance of the site into the future. In terms of examples, yes, certainly there are many good examples. I think that there are some particularly good examples overseas, and I'd like, if you were willing, I'm happy to take that on notice, but I think that we're trying to raise the bar with design quality. And the two key things which I think that this design does particularly well as integrating the design aesthetic of the same firm, is that it has a very, very clear visual demarcation between the tower, which is seen against other towers, and there is well, in architectural terms, you probably call it a shadow moulding or a shadow gap between the bottom of the tower and the top of our building, and it is set right back on the site. And that is acknowledged in your heritage consultant's report, that it is set well back on the site and it's above the major development. So I think I can certainly get some examples that I think would be very much state of the art, but I think that this is an opportunity for North Sydney Council to demonstrate this principle, which is well established here and overseas, to show the nuances, the finesse, the high quality design that can be achieved where this is done with respect to both the base and the top. I mean, we could cite buildings like the GPO, but in Martin Place. But in my opinion, this is a more appropriate and suitable example because it's a 20th century structure that is essentially shaped as a podium. That's what its shape is. You can't get away from that with its step back. At street level, it will still read as street level. And in fact, it will actually, by setting the tower back, it will actually offer relief to pedestrians, and they're people we're talking about. It will actually offer relief to pedestrians from those solid and stolid, may I say, walls of buildings which currently line and will be lining both sides of McLaren Street. So I think that it offers the opportunity to provide the best example of, and yes, we don't say that there are no impacts, but we're saying that these impacts have the opportunity to add to the story, to add to the usefulness, to add to the amenity, and to add to the architectural significance. All of these, which are aspects that are important, while it might have some fabric impacts, those impacts have been judged to be the least important aspects of the building that are worth keeping. So, but if you'd like some more of, I'll have a look for some.
No, could I just ask John? Oh, turn around. I'll just ask John Carrow, who's an architect, design architect of the project from the Cider office.
Hi everybody. You're just asking for a specific example. We a number of years ago.
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit, please?
Sorry, yeah. we did, just as a specific example, we did a number of years ago the Cove residential building in the city, in Harrington Street, over the St Patrick's Church site. We overhung the small brick church hall building. We added a facade alongside that, which was part of our entry to our building and had various other facilities in it. And that seems to have been held in high regard by the City of Sydney. And in fact, in many ways, some of the facade treatments and things have been copied by many architects since council have said this is a good way of dealing with those problems. So I think that's a very good example of how a tower can be set above heritage buildings and be treated in a way that's very respectful, given the things that Jody just mentioned about separation, about being clear about what is the heritage building and what is the new building, and also about being sympathetic in terms of segregating the two spaces and setting the building back. And all those things have been done both in that instance and what we're proposing here. Yeah. So that when you're a pedestrian at low level, the robustness and significance of the existing heritage building can't help but be manifest, as opposed to what's hovering above you.
Sorry, can I just ask
you to have a look at that as an example?
Very good example.
Yeah, this cove development. How many stories is it? The tower component?
It's probably 35 to 40 stories high.
Thank you. Anything else? James? No, that's all the questions. That's all the questions we have. Thank you for your comprehensive.
I'd just like to say one thing from the owners. Look, it's been 7 years. We put a lot of time into it. And I just ask that you consider the net public benefit this proposal provides. I'm not saying that there aren't impacts, but we would just love an open forum that we could come and meet with you and work with you to design the best building in the North Shore. We certainly have a team that are willing to do so. If we were able to work with you to develop the best building in the North Shore, I have a partner that's ready to go. This building will actually be built in the form. I know there's been some concerns about the guarantee of the design because obviously the planning proposal doesn't offer that. So I would just want to say one more time, please just look at the net public benefit of the tower and the dedicated pedestrian link, the tribute to Harry Seidler, and just a very unique building in the North Shore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Would you like us to end our meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. The way it works. Right. Yeah, that's